Representative Myrick of North Carolina wrote the foreword to a book called Muslim Mafia. Instead, it should have been titled The Diary of a Mad Congresswoman. Congressman Sue Myrick of Charlotte has accused CARE, the second largest Muslim advocacy organization, of plotting to influence members of Congress and trying to help interns obtain positions in legislative offices in order to advance their political agenda. That's consistent with what every political advocacy group in this country does. It's normally called activism, political involvement, social commitment, and democracy. The Congresswoman pretends that her behavior is not bigotry, religious intrusion, and an attempt to humiliate mainstream Muslims by tying an entire religious group to terrorism. She shows no objection to trampling on the feelings of some of her constituents politically under her care in Charlotte. For the last few years, she, along with 3 other U.S. congresspersons, have been engineers of discord and religious bigotry. As a congresswoman and elected sworn official to uphold the Constitution, Sue Myrick was completely wrong in writing the foreword to a book, bashing an entire religious group and dishonoring their rights to equality and political participation allowed by our laws. It's easy to be hateful and critical and undisciplined in the face of the fact that your personal demons are larger than your personal and political ethics. Ignorance deludes the ability to trust. Phobia deludes the ability to trust and treat all people justly. And it can make a man or a woman shamelessly ridicule innocent people. As bad as it sounds, it's worse in this case. Shouldn't leaders be held to a higher standard? Unless Myrick is a sovereign nation unto herself, her vow to uphold civil rights should take precedent against personal prejudice. Reasonable people have had to fend off a gag reflex which brought within earshot of her insults, fueled with religious prejudice, a so-called servant of the people. Sadly, we live in a time when principles seem to go right through those we call official. Ethics do not touch people like this, and they are what's wrong with America today. Myrick says she is very, very concerned about our national security, and that the first job of the federal government is to protect the American people. Who's going to protect us from leaders like her? The rise of Islamophobia has begun a terrible countdown to returning to the worst part of American history, resembling a time when internment camps were being built to contain Japanese Americans. Now it is American Muslims waiting to exhale as their presence here in America is assessed, investigated, and scrutinized. An entire religious group now must constantly apologize for every damage done by people who allegedly share their same religious beliefs, as if we are psychological clones of one another. Periodically, this nation goes through these awful periods where a selected group of people are treated like waste products. First it was the Native American Indians, and then came the African slaves, past the Japanese Americans, until prejudice found its way to attack and find fault with anyone who accepts Islam as their calling. History shows that prejudice always rears an evil head after a period of intense fear, followed by the interpretation of those whose foreignness demands that they be set apart and unofficially become the other. It's so simple to follow the flow and sit content amid the rhetoric of ignorance than to risk the friction and controversy that comes with standing up for what's right. It is pathetically easy to march to a disgruntled mob or with a disgruntled mob than to step out and stand on judgments of your own. And it's easier to fall back on the worst habits of the past than to build a better world. Building an impartial world is achieved by those willing to commit their mind and body in helping their fellow man, not standing aloof and watching the humiliation of others. Laws designed to discriminate should bother us more than they do. Torture should bother us more than it does. War and occupation should disrupt our personal sense of peace. And although many say that these are the faults of government, it's our society and our responsibility to enforce the principles on which this country is said to be founded. The eyes of the world are upon us, and it sees that American Muslims are being treated with suspicion and suffer the indignities of collective punishment. They are questioning this country's actions as well as its moral vision. This country is damaged by the conspiracy theories of elected officials like Sue Myrick, whose example falls short of liberty and whose behavior renounces human rights and rejects the generous spirit. Whatever political reasons used to marginalize and isolate American Muslim Middle Easterners should be condemned and censored. These kind of people who create suspicion and lies should get the boot out of office at the end of their terms. Hate mongers do nothing more than spread hate, and these guys are getting paid for it with your tax dollars. Stopping it is a job that must be undertaken by real Americans if this country wants to maintain any moral credibility. Fairness and goodwill should be the moral position that unites all of us. Democracy is not an easy form of government, and few nations have been able to sustain it. It is more than a mere idea, yet there is a hallucination nowadays that it can somehow be maintained by intent instead of action, something to be done only for the length of time it takes to try and fail. Sue Myrick is failing, and so are we, and so is democracy, if it is not of any real worth to the people who are suffering from the lack of it. There's no question that there are other categories of oppression besides Black Americans and those with Hispanic surnames. Yet there is a transparent insincerity about the way Americans are dealing with these other categories. I know that, and so do you. It's pretty obvious. Myrick and the rest of her cronies are not actors, so ask them to stop the drama. Radical Islamists in the United States are not trying to replace the Constitution with Islamic law. Infiltrators are not trying to take over our nation from the inside. Myrick insinuated this nonsense in the foreword to a controversial new book called Muslim Mafia. She did it when she was on the clock. She did it on our dime. Don't you think we have more important issues like funding education and allowing all Americans health care? Myrick herself survived cancer. She had some of the best health care your money could buy. Don't other Americans deserve the same thing? Is it less important now than when she was sick? Sue Myrick should be ashamed of herself. And it's time to remind her of this fact. With war, unemployment, inequality in education, and a weakening family structure, tell the Congresswoman to stop writing forwards to hate-filled books and try writing legislation that would create a better, fairer America for all its people. My name is Khalila Sabra, and I am an American. I denounce violence, regardless of who advocates it. Osama Bin Laden is a jerk and a cruel one. This goes without saying. Muslims have no obligation or allegiance to him. He's a serial killer. Why would we support such evil? So there is nothing to fear from people like me. There is a lot to fear from people like Myrick, who are a threat to people like me. Okay, how do you know how to edit it now?
I haven't stopped it.